Before a dilapidated desk, Lin held a quill, the lamp's light flickering upon it. He wrote the principles he'd lived by since he traversed to this world 2 years prior in his diary. Lin, time's up. Hang the lamp outside, prepare to open shop. A voice, raspy as though gnawing bones, rang out. Lin shook his head. This voice belonged to their potion shop's proprietor, his teacher who had rescued him 2 years ago. He was an assistant in this potion shop in a different world. Coming, Lin shouted. However, at that moment, a cold synthetic voice suddenly resonated in his mind. Lin was stunned. Was this voice the system? Could it be that after traversing this world for 2 years, he had finally awakened a special ability? However, he didn't immediately explore this as he knew that if he didn't act according to his teacher's command promptly, he would perish. Lin quickly exited the dim attic. Immediately, he saw his teacher dragging a bisected carcass of an unidentified being towards the adjacent operating room. Crimson blood left a long trail on the moldy floor. Soon, the shrill sound of a chainsaw emanated from the operation room. Hearing the gnawing sounds behind him, Lin's expression steadied. Creak, creak. The neglected floorboards beneath his feet made a piercing noise. Lin moved to the hall, picked up the lantern from the corner, and twisted the winder. Drop by drop, crimson blood fell from within onto the wick. Woo! A strand of crimson flame ignited. If one listened closely, faint, eerie screams could be heard from within the lantern. With a calm expression, Lin carefully opened the door. The outside was enshrouded in darkness, faintly mist-wrapped, and occasionally, mysterious giggles could be heard from within the shadows. He maintained his composure, hanging the lantern on the doorpost, illuminating the dilapidated sign beside it. Lin immediately planned to turn around and return to the potion shop. However, at this moment, a low and eerie laugh emanated from the darkness. Young man, good morning. Do you have any useless trash for this old woman? I will give you corresponding rewards, haha. Within the darkness, a strand of dim light appeared, and an old woman, hunched, donned in tattered hemp clothes, dragging a cart, emerged. A kindly smile rested on her face. Yet, Lin distinctly saw. The lantern she held was made of human skin, and the rusty cart she dragged seemed to grow from her hand. Lin remained composed. All right, wait a moment. Lin quickly turned around, walking back to the potion shop, and grabbed 2 black bags from the door. Faintly, a heavy, putrid smell of blood emanated from the bags, and it seemed like something inside was struggling, emitting muted groans. Calmly, Lin placed it on the old woman's cart. Thank you, young man, you are a kind soul. The smile didn't leave the old woman's face. She slowly extended her withered hand and gouged 2 bloody eyeballs from her sockets. Young man, this is your reward from this old woman. Gazing at the steaming eyeballs, Lin calmly extended his hand to accept them, saying, I'll accept them, thank you. The old woman's smile was particularly radiant, but her hollow eye sockets were especially chilling. Then, under Lin's watchful gaze, the old woman, pulling her cart, slowly disappeared into the darkness. Lin maintained his composure but sighed in relief internally, and immediately returned to the potion shop. He learned from his teacher that the tailor shop stitched human skin, the pork shop sold human flesh, and they were just across the street from their potion shop. Yet, in the scavenger's hands, were the eyeballs of both shop owners. This leads to another rule he deduced about this world. Lin turned around, his expression forcibly calm. Lin calmed his emotions and tentatively spoke. System. At that moment, a panel abruptly appeared in front of Lin's eyes. An unnoticed assistant at Bloodsaw Potion Shop. A frail yet astute young human. He had lived in this world for 2 years, his existence hanging by a thread, uncertain when death might claim him. Lin calmly scrutinized the panel that had abruptly materialized before him. Over the 2 years, he had developed the ability to keep his composure, enabling him to maintain his calm in the face of nearly anything. He studied it over and over for a moment. He roughly understood some functions of the system. So it means, as long as I continually complete the tasks given by the creatures of this world, I can receive corresponding rewards and enhance my various abilities. Lin pondered in his heart. If this was the case, then his chances of surviving in this world increased slightly. And at this moment, his teacher's raspy voice and footsteps came from within the house. Lin, I need to go out for a bit. I should be back within 2 days. You need to keep a good watch on the shop, lock the door at night, and don't let those annoying thieves take anything. A dragging sound echoed from the hallway. Lin immediately returned inside. At the front door, his teacher was dragging a blood-soaked sack. Something inside seemed to be rustling, struggling. That towering figure, at least 2 meters high, with a body covered in dark red tumors, was his teacher, and a panel instantaneously appeared before Lin's eyes. Lin's heart quivered, but his face remained impassive. Sir, is there anything I need to be cautious about while you're away? Lin inquired. He knew this was something he had to ask, otherwise, he might end up dead. Bloodsaw Maniac slung the sack over his back, his voice raspy as he said, "Those with money, pay. Those without, make an equivalent exchange. Those without money who are unwilling to exchange, you do the cutting yourself." Thump, a blood-stained boning knife was thrown before Lin. "Remember," Bloodsaw Maniac, shouldering that blood-drenched sack, strode towards the shop exit. "No matter what noises you hear outside, do not step out of the range of the soul lamp. No matter who asks you to go out and provide medical treatment, do not pay any attention. At night, lock the doors, shut the windows, kill anyone who comes in, ignore anyone who calls you." Lin nodded, taking his teacher's words to heart. "Yes, sir, I understand." Then, under his watchful eyes, the burly Bloodsaw Maniac quickly disappeared into the dense darkness. Time swiftly passed. Lin began his daily routine, wiping the blood off the ground and adjusting the common potions for treating various diseases. Then he sat at the counter, the boning knife in hand, his eyes closed, waiting as time passed. And the next moment, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks sounded from outside the door. Lin lifted his head towards the direction of the door. A dirty little girl stood at the entrance, clutching a doll in her arms, her little hand gently knocking on the door. A pitiable expression was on her face as she said, "Is the shopkeeper in? My doll's arm is broken, can you fix my doll?" Lin glanced over. He saw the flame of the soul lamp outside the door flickering slightly. The chaotic flicker represents the strength of the newcomer, and under the protection of the soul lamp, as long as he does not invite them in, they cannot enter. Of course, exceptions are made for powerful beings. Information about the girl appeared before his eyes instantly. A chill ran down Lin's spine, but his face remained calm. "Come in." As a potion shop assistant in this wandering soul lane, Lin knew that there were rules here as well. These evil spirits and ghosts wouldn't be murderous unless you touched their taboos. Business could still be done. The girl, looking pitiable, sat in front of the platform with her doll in her arms. Lin glanced. The arm of the doll in her arms had been completely torn apart, oozing crimson blood and stains, as if something had bitten it off fiercely. "Doctor, please save my doll. Her arm is broken. Her arm is gone. She is my favorite doll. If this continues, she will die," the girl said pitifully. Suddenly, the corner of her mouth jerked violently, stretching to the back of her neck, and a bloody smile appeared on her face instantly. "You can save the doll, can't you? Right, big brother?" Lin remained calm, extending his hand to examine the torn surface of the doll's arm. At this moment, a system voice rang in his mind. "Lin, this system is indeed powerful, actually able to automatically assist him in making a diagnosis. If that's the case, it would be much simpler." He glanced at the little girl, ignoring her bloody smile, and said, "Have you eaten anything recently?" The little girl immediately retracted her bloody smile, once again returning to her harmless and pitiable appearance, her hands clasped together, saying, "I haven't eaten for many days. I'm extremely hungry, but last night when I was asleep, I did have a big meal in my dream." She licked the corner of her mouth, suddenly showing a silver bell-like smile, saying, "It was delicious." The doll on the table suddenly showed the same creepy smile as the girl, repeatedly echoing those words, "Delicious, delicious." Lin maintained his composure and said, "If that's the case, I suspect you must have eaten something you shouldn't have. What you ate was likely this arm of your doll." The girl's smile froze momentarily, yet the doll's laughter persisted incessantly. "Dolly loves mommy. Mommy loves Dolly." Lin lifted his head, his eyes deadpan, and asked, "Have you been feeling discomfort in your stomach lately?" The girl stiffly replied, "My stomach's been growling, feels like something's scratching it." Lin nodded, taking notes, and casually queried, "So, it should be right. It seems it hasn't been digested yet. Do you want surgery or physical therapy?" The girl, remaining rigid, asked, "How would it be done?" Clang. Lin thrust the bloody boning knife into the table. "We cut open your belly, take out your doll's arm, and then I sew you back up." Instantly, the laughter of the doll stopped abruptly. A shiver ran from the girl's feet to her head. Lin stood up, picking up gloves and a mask from the counter. He gazed at her calmly. "Whether you want it removed from above or below, I can assist with either, and it's cheaper." The girl, in a daze, muttered, "From above then." "All right." Lin pushed aside the things on the counter and flexed his wrists, stating, "You are small, no need for an operating room. I can assist you now, but you'll have to endure it and not bite off my arm." Under the horrified gaze of the girl, Lin's immense shadow enveloped her, with a mask and leather gloves, his eyes emanating calm light. The girl sat on the small stool, instantly hugging her doll. "Can I refuse?" Lin replied indifferently. "No, my teacher said, once you enter this shop, you must get treated. Otherwise, you should at least leave something behind." The girl shivered vacantly and eventually conceded, "All right then." She opened her mouth wider. With a crack, the girl pulled her mouth to the back of her neck, revealing her enormous, gaping maw. A foul stench hit them in the face. Lin, with a composed expression, fetched a brace from the counter, securing her mouth open to prevent any stress reactions. Then, he flexed his arm and reached into the girl's mouth. With a slurp, it went in smoothly. It was deep. The girl's eyes widened instantly. Don't move around." Lin, with a stern face, calmly explored her stomach. "It'll be over soon. If you don't want your doll to remain incomplete, stay still." Under the horrified gaze of the doll on the counter, Lin patiently continued to extract various strange objects covered in a viscous liquid from the girl's stomach. The girl, with her eyes wide and mouth agape, continuously made fearful moans. "Found it." The thought crossed Lin's mind. His fingers touched an object that was still squirming. With a crack, to the immense horror of both the girl and the doll, Lin extracted a small arm coated in a viscous liquid from her stomach. It was indeed the arm of the doll she had consumed. Lin calmly rinsed the arm and placed it on the counter, stating, "This should be it. You must have been very hungry that night, unconsciously eating your doll's arm. Your doll, seeing your hunger, didn't remind you. However, you must be careful in the future. Don't casually eat strange things, they are hard to digest." The girl, with her mouth held open by the brace, couldn't utter a word. Physical therapy, 10 skull coins. Stitching, 30 coins. With his mask on, Lin calmly took out hemp rope and a sharp, long needle, gleaming sharply. "Do we stitch now?" The doll in her arms started to cry out of fear, fluttering, trying to escape. "Now, stitch." The girl, her mouth braced open, uttered vacantly. Lin put on gloves, replying indifferently, "All right, help me hold it down, and I'll start with the needle." The girl immediately widened her eyes and pressed the fluttering, struggling doll against the counter. The cold light reflected in Lin's eyes made the doll scream in fear. "Starting now." Swish, swish, swish. More than half an hour later, accompanied by the extremely tragic screams of the doll, Lin took out scissors, cut off the thread, and said, "All right, apply some medicine every day, and in less than a week, this arm will be back to normal." Lin took a bottle of green potion from the counter. After opening it, he poured it on the stitched area, and the doll instantly let out a harsh scream. The girl blankly asked, Is it over?" Lin clapped her hands and quietly said, "Done. You can pay now. Physical therapy 10 coins. Stitching 30 coins. 1 bottle of medicine 10 coins. A total of 7 bottles, so 110 coins in total. Thank you for your patronage, and welcome back again." The doll swiftly clung to the girl, trembling and looking at Lin in fear. Apparently, in its mind, Lin had left an unforgettable psychological shadow. The girl blankly fumbled around her body. After a long time, she took out 20 coins and shakily placed them on the counter, saying, I only brought 20. Lin indifferently said, "Okay, you're 90 coins short. Which part of you do you plan to mortgage? I can cut it for you, this is free." With that, Lin picked up the boning knife. The girl instantly stepped back, revealing an expression. "I have 10 more coins." The girl quickly took out 10 coins from her clothes and placed them on the counter. Lin indifferently said, "Still short 80. The girl placed the 6 bottles of potion down, saying, "I will come back to buy these potions later." Lin took back the potions and indifferently said, "Still short 20. The girl, trembling, said, "Can I get credit?" Lin, holding the knife, stepped out and indifferently said, "Small business, no credit, I can't do it. But 20 coins are not much. You leave one of your eyeballs, I can give you the potions, and I can even give you 40 coins as change." The girl took a step back, holding her doll and covering her eye, and tremblingly said, "Can I pay with something else?" Lin indifferently said, "You say, I'll evaluate." The girl swallowed saliva and, trembling, said, "How about I let you have a go at me, and you forgive all my debts?" Lin spoke indifferently, "Small business. I don't accept bodily compensation. Rest assured, I only want your right eye. You can redeem it once you earn enough money." "All right. Okay." A few minutes later, Lin calmly washed the blood off his hands. Then, he placed the eyeball into a bottle filled with a special reagent and labeled it appropriately. Turning around, he looked at the girl, who was covering one of her eyes and politely said, "Bloodsaw Potion Shop sincerely serves you." Lin bowed deeply. The girl, clutching her doll, walked out, and her voice could be heard from afar. "I should quickly find Mom. I won't come again," sobs. What a sinister shop. Lin was taken aback. Looking towards the door again, the silhouette of the girl had already disappeared into the darkness. Completion 2%. Lin's gaze immediately fell on the plate on the counter, which contained several organs scooped out from the girl's stomach. Lin, it had to be said, he indeed had a terrifying conjecture. Lin stood up, washed those parts clean, and then sealed them in bottles, preparing to discuss this matter with the girl when she came next time. He opened his own panel. Due to the previous rewards, he had gained a total of 50 points of surgical skill experience and an additional 50 skull coins of his own. The customer's money belonged to the shop, he couldn't use it. So, his total property at the moment was 150 skull coins. Skull coins were a basic currency in the world he now inhabited, usable as a general equivalent object. But Lin hadn't truly stepped out of this shop in the last 2 years, so he also had no opportunity to use it. But having more money never hurts. Time swiftly passed. Lin, with his eyes closed, held a bone-picking knife in his hand, like a statue. The soul lamp at the entrance represented a kind of rule, telling the wandering souls in the darkness that this was a place with an owner. If filled with malice, they would certainly pay the corresponding price. Most wandering spirit monsters generally would not invade when the soul lamp was lit, because within the homestead sheltered by the soul lamp, the owner can use the soul lamp to suppress the invading evil spirits and monsters at any time if he wishes. However, this does not exclude some extremely evil ghosts and monsters. For them, there are no rules in this world that will be obeyed. Thump, thump, thump. At this time, knocking sounds came from outside the door again. Welcome. Lin opened his eyes, and he instantly saw a monster with the body of a burly pig-headed man appearing at the front door, one of his eyes bloody, without an eyeball, wearing a scarlet apron and holding a butcher knife that seemed to have just cut something. A panel instantly appeared in front of Lin. Bad luck. The pigfolk cursed while covering his own eye socket, saying, just because there was no useless trash to give to that old woman, she took one of my eyes. Next time I encounter her, I definitely spit. He spat out a mouthful of foul-smelling phlegm. The pigfolk strode in, the soul lamp flickering constantly. A foul and bloody scent swept in, making Lin feel a surge of nausea. The pigfolk plopped down on the stool in front of the counter, the remaining sharp pig eye looking at Lin. He glanced around and said, "Where's Bloodsaw? Let him come out, exchange an eyeball with me, and I'll exchange top-quality prey with him." Lin maintained his composure and quietly said, "My teacher is out on an errand. If there is anything, you can tell me." The pigfolk paused for a moment, then turned his head, squinted his eye, and his gaze fell on Lin as if he were scrutinizing a piece of meat. Oh, waves surged in Lin's heart, but his face still maintained composure. However, his decision was very right. If he tried to deceive and tell this pork demon that his teacher was in the backyard after he noticed the discrepancies, he would definitely attack him immediately. Being honest and straightforward, on the other hand, would make the other party wary. "Which type of eyeball do you need?" Lin turned around, quietly pointing to the eyeballs soaking in the reagents on the shelf. "We have human eyes, pig eyes, undead eyes, bad eyes, blood doll eyes. You can choose whichever you like. Different eyes have different prices." The cruel light flashed in the eyes of the pigfolk, revealing a mouthful of fangs, and a rich foul breath swept through. "I think your eyeballs seem quite good." He stretched out his tongue and licked his own cracked lips. Lin knew that as long as he showed fear, this pigfolk would undoubtedly attack him without any scruples. "Mine." Lin turned his head and looked at him calmly. Then, under the vicious gaze of the pigfolk, Lin slowly stretched out 3 fingers and, in front of him, inserted them into his own eye socket, bit by bit gouging out his right eye. Squeak, squeak. A few seconds later, Lin had his steaming eye resting in his palm. The empty eye socket was dripping with fresh blood, puffing out heat. But his face remained unchanged. 1 for 200 skull coins. If it doesn't match, no returns. The pigfolk was stunned. He didn't expect that the seemingly frail human in front of him could gouge out his own eyeball so ruthlessly in front of him. When he had his eyeball taken by that scavenger, he had wailed in pain for quite a while. Yet, Lin could still maintain his composure. His gaze flickered. He had begun to suspect that this apprentice of Bloodsaw might have been altered by Bloodsaw into a stitched monster. No ordinary person could possibly remain so composed in his presence. "I don't want yours, I want my own eyeball," he uttered deeply in a raspy voice. Lin's expression was serene. He casually pressed his eyeball back into its socket and quietly sat back down. Lin then reached into his bosom. "This I do have." Then, under the astonished gaze of the pigfolk, Lin drew from his bosom a large eyeball, still sticky with flesh and blood, the eyeball still moving. The pigfolk abruptly stood up, trembling. This, indeed. He recognized at a glance that eyeball was the one that had been plucked out by the old woman. But how could his eyeball be with this human apprentice? Lin placed the eyeball on the counter and said quietly, "I met that kind old lady this morning. This is the toy she gave me." The pigfolk stared intently at the eyeball on the counter, cold sweat dripping from the pig hairs on the back of his neck, trailing down his spine. for he knew very well the horror of that scavenger. With his own strength, he was easily robbed of his eyeball by that scavenger. If she wished, she could just as easily take his head, and that scavenger would actually give his eyeball to this frail human. He found this human apprentice more and more extraordinary. No, it was even becoming somewhat terrifying, because he couldn't fathom the depth of this human. The pigfolk stared at Lin hesitantly and said, "The thing the old woman gave you. Would you dare give it to me?" Lin replied indifferently, "Not give, sell. 200 skull coins, market price." Was he truly unafraid? The pigfolk scrutinized him, searching for a flaw. Could it be that he had a close relationship with that scavenger? The pigfolk pulled out a money bag from his bosom and scattered a substantial amount of skull coins across the counter. He fixed his gaze on Lin and said, "Fine, I'll buy it." With composure, Lin collected the coins into the counter, then put his gloves and mask back on, and pulled out a single eyepiece, speaking lightly, "Deal. Do you want it done here, or shall we go to the operating table?" Here, the pigfolk declared definitively. No resident of Wandering Soul Lane would want to go to Bloodsaw's operating table. "All right." Lin calmly picked up the bone-scraping knife and instructed, "Lean on the counter, rest your head on the table, and if it hurts, feel free to shout." The pigfolk grinned maliciously. "Do you think I fear pain?" PFF. Lin took a sip of alcohol and then sprayed it onto the bloody blade. The pigfolk stopped talking immediately. Lin lit a candle and heated the blade over the flame for several minutes. With narrowed eyes, he approached him with the knife, little by little. A drop of cold sweat plopped onto the counter. The pigfolk shivered. "Do you need a knife just to install an eyeball?" Lin quietly spoke, "I just had a look. There are considerable concretions and blood clots in your eye socket. It seems you don't take good care of your eyes. Consider this step extra service. You don't have to thank me." The pigfolk was horrified, but it was already too late. The sound of stirring and the blade scraping against bone echoed. The pigfolk let out heart-wrenching, terrified screams. Several minutes later, Lin cleaned the residue in his eye socket with disinfectant, wondering why this time it increased his blade skill instead of his surgical ability. "It's done." Lin calmly wiped clean the bone-scraping knife in his hand with a cloth. "Don't move. I'm about to install the eyeball. If you move recklessly, be careful, it might get installed backward." The pigfolk leaned there, white froth bubbling from his piggy mouth, his body twitching intermittently, obviously not hearing what Lin had said. Lin blinked, subconsciously muttering, "Damn, I forgot to use anesthesia." It seemed like he also forgot to use it the last time when he was stitching up the arm of a doll. "Whatever." Lin shook his head, his expression returning to calm. He used tweezers to pick up the eye that he had just soaked in reagent, then turned his head, his gaze searching through the medicine cabinet behind him. A few seconds later, Lin took out a white potion bottle from above the cabinet. One could vaguely see that it was labeled with strong glue, and a few other characters that were obviously handwritten. "What is that?" The revived pigfolk shivered. Holding the eyeball, Lin shook the potion in his hand and spoke quietly. "It's a special strong adhesive I made. It can prevent your eyeball from falling out during the installation." Lin explained seriously. The pigfolk shivered. "Install it quickly." "Did you hear me? I don't want to stay here any longer." "Did you hear me?" Lin nodded. "Don't worry, we physicians have strong professional ethics." Lin calmly mixed the viscous potion. Then he evenly applied it around the eyeball, aligned it to the right position, and gently placed the eyeball atop the eye socket. He took out professional tools again and adjusted the angle of the eyeball. He felt around his toolbox. Then he took out a hammer from it. "What are you doing?" The pigfolk screamed tremblingly. Lin frowned. "Don't move, this is the last physical step. If it's misaligned because you moved, I will have to take it out and reinstall it, which will then add a large sum to your surgery fee." Lin shook his head and held down the terrified pig head. Then, carefully with the hammer, he tapped the small bracket holding the eyeball, attentively inserting the eyeball into its socket bit by bit. A few minutes later, Lin blinked. The pigfolk shuddered instantly. "What happened?" "What happened?" Lin frowned. "It's inverted." "Don't worry." Lin, with a calm expression, reached out, grabbed the bracket holding the eyeball, and forcefully pulled it up. With a rip, amidst the horrified screams of the pigfolk and his rapidly decreasing sanity value, Lin forcibly removed the inverted eyeball. "It's just a minor medical accident." Lin calmly readjusted the position, saying, "There's no charge for this. Let me adjust the position again." The pigfolk, in terror, let out sharp screams and struggled frantically. "I don't want it anymore. I won't have it done here. Stay still." Lin's eyes sharpened, and he shouted, "This is the final step. As a doctor, since you have paid, I must be responsible for you. I must ensure every one of my patients leaves here intact." With that, Lin fiercely raised the hammer in his hand. "Stop." The pigfolk stretched out his hand and yelled in horror. Bang! Sparks flew. A dozen minutes later, the pigfolk, shivering uncontrollably, sat there with a blank expression. Across the counter, Lin, clad calmly in a white coat, sat, holding a quill, leisurely writing his medical report. He pushed a small batch of potions forward. These potions, half are to be taken orally, the other half applied topically, twice a day. Take them on time, and roughly in 2 days, your vision should start to recover. Of course, if you want more effective potions, the price will need to be tenfold. Time to settle the bill, including surgery fees, potion costs, and nursing fees. You've already paid for the eye charges. In total, it's 546 skull coins. If this is no issue, sign here. Lin looked up. His eyes, lifeless, conveyed friendly. A fingerprint will do. The pigfolk, with trembling hands, pressed a fingerprint onto the report. He tremulously took a large money bag from his bosom and placed over 500 skull coins on the counter, asking, "May I leave now?" Lin counted the coins. He lifted his head. His gaze fell upon the pigfolk's still bulging money bag. However, the next moment, his attention was drawn to his swelling belly. The pigfolk turned to leave. Lin abruptly reached out, stopping him. "Wait." It was evident. The pigfolk's body subconsciously shuddered. "What now?" He turned back. "I've discerned some new problems within you. If not diagnosed, they might inflict unknown impacts on your body." The pigfolk, gritting his tusks, retorted, "Don't you dare deceive me. I despise being lied to the most." Lin, grave, responded, "I am a doctor, I do not deceive. Everyone who enters my shop is my patient. I must be responsible for my patient's health. If I see an issue and do not communicate it to you, that is truly a lack of medical ethics." Facing Lin's stern and earnest eyes, the pigfolk, albeit with significant reluctance, finally sat back down on the stool in front of the counter, his voice laden with uncertainty. "What's the problem?" "I feel very healthy." "Extend your arm, I'll take your pulse." The pigfolk hesitantly placed his arm, laden with pig hair, on the counter. In the end, he decided to trust him once more. Lin, his expression serene, placed his hand on his pulse, feeling it carefully. Gradually, the pigfolk noticed Lin's brows furrowing. His heart instantly rose to his throat. "Is this really a major issue?" he asked nervously. What he feared most was a doctor frowning before him, because that certainly boded not well. Lin withdrew his hand, raised his head to look solemnly at the pigfolk, his brows still furrowed. "The issue is neither minor nor severe, it depends on how it's dealt with." The pigfolk, anxiously, "What is the problem?" "Ectopic pregnancy." Brief silence and waves of cool wind whooshed in from the door. The next moment, the pigfolk roared, abruptly seized Lin by the collar. Lifting his in his fury, he bellowed, "Ectopic pregnancy. You bloody saying I have an ectopic pregnancy. I'm bloody male. I'm giving you one more chance to organize your words." Lin's expression remained tranquil. Adjusting his eyeball, he stated solemnly, "The pulse is revealing as such. There is no mistake. You must trust my medical proficiency." The pigfolk roared, "I am male. I don't have a uterus." Lin nodded, solemnly responding, "That's why it's said to be an ectopic pregnancy. If there was a uterus, it would be more troublesome, necessitating more profound gender correction surgery, and your burden would be heavier." The pigfolk, trembling, released Lin's collar and slumped down onto the stool. "What are you thinking about?" "I am thinking about how to chop you up." The pigfolk, his eyes brimming with anger and shame, gnashed his teeth. "Let's not consider such irrelevant matters first." Lin straightened his collar, sat in front of the counter, took out a medical record, and quietly asked, "Have you recently experienced abdominal distension and pain, dry heaving, loss of appetite, bleeding below, etc.?" The pigfolk, slamming the table and standing up, endured his trembling and humiliation and questioned, "Tell me how I bleed below." "How do I bleed?" Lin continued his documentation, adjusting his eyeball, stating, "Please, patient, refrain from agitation. It's merely a standard inquiry. Excluding bleeding, have any of these symptoms occurred?" The pigfolk, his eyes nearly bursting and teeth gritting, replied, "What if they have? Can't I just be food poisoning?" Lin, adjusting his eyeball, glanced at him, asking, "How long have these been occurring?" The pigfolk, grinding his teeth, replied, 1 month. Lin continued to document, calmly inquiring, "When was the last time you engaged in mating behavior? Do you have any adverse habits normally, like multiple pig activities or using certain harmful implements?" The pigfolk stood there, arms incessantly shivering, stating, "You try asking one more time." Clearly, he was extremely angered by this question. Lin calmly extended his hand to stop him, stating, "All right, I won't ask this question anymore. Next question. During your most recent mating behavior, did you feel below?" Lin frowned, made a tearing gesture, and asked, "A tearing pain?" The pigfolk truly could endure no more this time. He seized Lin by the collar, his anger mingled with embarrassment as he roared, "I've bloody well put up with you for too long. Translate for me, what is tearing pain? Translate it for me, what is tearing pain?" Lin extended his hand, firmly pressing against his chest, shaking his head. "Calm down. Further confirmation requires the assistance of professional equipment. This is just a process I, as a doctor, must follow, fundamentally for the sake of your health. It's for your own good. You wouldn't want any lingering maladies, would you?" The pigfolk puffed angrily through his nostrils, his chest heaving violently, his face flushed with rage, but finally, under Lin's soothing, he let go. Lin, once again straightening his collar and putting down his pen, glanced at him and shook his head. "Although I do know that males, most likely, can't get pregnant, the pulse does indeed relay the signs of pregnancy, so I speculate if you didn't impregnate yourself through normal mating activities." Seeing that the pigfolk was about to explode in anger again, Lin spoke faster. "There's another possibility. You might have inadvertently consumed something containing strange powers, causing a mutation within you and indirectly leading to your impregnation. Because I see you're looking unwell, with dark circles under your eyes, a pallor to your face, and your wrists are cold. Have you been unable to satiate your hunger no matter how much you have eaten recently, and often feeling famished?" The pigfolk hesitated, then sat down again. Although previous words had been unreliable, this indeed hit the nail on the head. He had indeed been feeling hunger recently, and even binge eating and drinking were unable to alleviate the hunger. "How do you know?" Lin, without showing any emotion, stood up, brought out a wooden basin from behind the house, filled it with clear water, and then from below the counter took out a bottle of light green potion and poured it into the basin. Whoosh! A strand of green smoke, shaped like a skull, whirled up from the basin. Lin clapped his hands, saying, "This is a spirit summoning potion. Place your hand inside. If this indeed is a malevolent spirit parasitizing inside you or these odd mutations, this potion can reveal some truths." The pigfolk glanced at him hesitantly. He stuck out his snout to sniff. After ensuring that there seemed to be no danger, he still tried to put his hand into the basin. In an instant, he immediately felt a chill slowly rising from his abdomen. "This? What is this?" His face altered slightly. The green water in the basin began to bubble continuously, and strands of eerie black aura gradually emerged from his body. And it was the next moment, suddenly, his abdomen twisted in pain, and a giggling face protruded from his belly. Ah, the pigfolk's hair stood on end. My stomach. His belly began to deform continuously. The face seemed to struggle as if trying to crawl out. And gradually, beside the face, two protruding hands emerged on his belly. The giggling sound suddenly changed eerily and transformed into wails. Wah. Seeing this, the pigfolk was entirely undone. "What the hell is this thing?" Bang! Lin decisively took up the frying pan next to his and smashed it against the protruding face, flattening his stomach. The wailing and giggling abruptly ceased. Thump! The pigfolk plopped down on the bench, his expression blank. This. Lin pushed the wooden basin aside and calmly said, "Preliminary diagnosis confirms it indeed is a type of ectopic pregnancy due to a parasitic evil spirit. However, seeing the effect of that blow just now, this little devil has not fully formed yet. You are really lucky to have met me." At this, the pigfolk were thoroughly convinced. He dropped to his knees with a thump, trembling, "Young man, my attitude was too intense just now. Please, don't take it to heart. Please save me. Please save me." He was truly scared. If it were a real evil spirit and he had to fight it head on, he would be fearless. But it was growing inside his stomach. He was really helpless. Lin, calmly holding a pen, said, "Do you remember eating anything unclean?" The pigfolk trembled. "A month ago, when I was out, I remember I ate a child. But it was just a little ghost. I sucked it in one breath. Besides that, I only eat pork and human flesh." Lin pondered for a moment. Then he lifted his head and seriously said, "Let's perform surgery to see." Moments later, inside the dimly lit operating room, a few candles and a couple of bronze mirrors cast light onto the pigfolk's greasy big belly. The pigfolk, trembling, lay on that extremely uncomfortable operating table and said, "So hastily you decide to operate on me. Don't you plan to diagnose a bit more thoroughly?" Lin put on gloves and a mask, calmly sterilizing the surgical knife, saying, "Simplicity and crudeness are the truth. You have to believe in my diagnostic ability and moral standards. I'll make an incision on your stomach. If it can be cut off, I'll cut it off for you. If it cannot be cut off," the pigfolk trembled, "I'll cut you." Lin shook his head. He took out the boning knife often used by his teachers and started sharpening it in front of him. The pigfolk lay thighs blankly, looking at the one after another iron hook hanging down from the ceiling of the operating room, and the various terrifying monster tissues soaking in large jars around. For some reason, he felt like a boar about to be slaughtered on a chopping board. Sparks were flying. Stop sharpening. Stop sharpening. The pigfolk, unable to bear the harsh sound of sharpening, issued a roaring urge. Soon, Lin washed the sharpened surgical knife in disinfectant. When he picked it up again, it was shining sharply against the light. Lin walked to the side of the pigfolk with the knife and put his ear to his greasy belly to listen. Then he professionally took out a pencil in a position lower on his stomach. He drew a cross. Lin calmly said, "Are you ready?" The pigfolk trembled. "Ready." Lin pressed a button under the operating table, and the pigfolk's limbs were immediately locked by 4 iron shackles. The pigfolk screamed in horror. Lin frowned and said with the knife in his hand, "Don't yell, I haven't even started the operation. These handcuffs are to prevent you from struggling and affecting my surgical ability. It's for your own good." The pigfolk trembled. "Have you ever performed surgery on others before?" Lin calmly sharpened the knife, saying, "I've seen my teacher slaughter pigs. You are my first patient. But it's more or less the same. I am very confident in my surgical ability." A moment of silence. I won't do it. I won't do it. Release me. Release me." The pigfolk roared and struggled frantically. Lin's eyes instantly became fierce, and he shouted loudly, "What a joke. The knife is already sharpened, and now you say you won't do it. Aren't you afraid that your stomach will get bigger and bigger and then be burst open by the evil spirit? Since you are on my operating table, I must be responsible for you. Today, you have to do it whether you want to or not." A scream was extremely miserable. Half an hour later, the pigfolk lay this in a stupor on the operating table, his body constantly twitching. He had already lost count of how many times he had passed out and woken up due to the pain. And just the next moment, a clear cry of a baby echoed throughout the operating room. Lin, covered in blood, took a blood-covered, seemingly underdeveloped crying blood baby from his stomach, showing a satisfied smile on his face, wiped his sweat, and said, "Congratulations, father and daughter are safe." In front of him, a page about the baby appeared instantly. Chaotic evil. The pigfolk muttered blankly, "Sew it up." Lin nodded. Then he brought out the bill, pondered, and said, "Although this isn't the best time, it still needs to be discussed. The total surgical fee is 300 skull coins, but since this is my first time, I can give you a 20% discount, totaling 240 skull coins. The sewing fee is separate, summing up to 280 coins. Would you sign here?" Oink, oink. The pigfolk let out mournful pig-like screams, his spirit nearly broken. "Sew it, sew it." He trembled. Lin nodded, and pointing at various threads on the wall, said, "We have hemp thread, wool thread, cotton thread, wire, and steel wire here, each with a different price. Which one would you like?" A tear fell from the corner of the pigfolk's eye. He mumbled, "Hemp thread." Lin nodded, took down the hemp thread, and asked, "Do you need anything else?" So, he roared. Lin nodded, expertly picked up his steel needle, flicked the hemp thread, and approached the pigfolk, biting and pulling the end of the thread. "Be patient, bear with it a little, I'm starting now." Finally, 10 minutes later, Lin took out scissors, cut the thread, patted the knot on it, poured medicine into his mouth, and sprayed it on his abdomen. Instantly, the sewn flesh started to close bit by bit, healing quickly. Lin removed his mask, unlocked the handcuffs on the operating table, held the blood-soaked infant, and smiled, saying, "Congratulations, the surgery went very smoothly. As you saw, this was indeed a routine case of spirit parasitism. Although it was a demonic spirit, it was indeed a healthy daughter. If raised, perhaps, buzz." For a moment, Lin only felt a blur before his eyes. Then he saw a quivering shadow abruptly dash from the operating table, clutching his abdomen, fleeing towards the door with unimaginable speed. He won't come again. He swore he would absolutely never come again. Undergoing surgery was like being butchized like a pig. This one doctor's visit has left him with psychological trauma. "Boss, you've forgotten your daughter. The one you went through such pains to bring into this world. You can't just give birth and not care for her. This is a potion shop, not a childcare center." Lin dashed forward, shouting, chasing all the way to the main door. Yet, upon looking again, there was no trace of that pigfolk in the darkness. Lin heaved a sigh. After a moment's contemplation, he shouted into the enigmatic darkness, "Boss, if your stomach gives you more trouble, come back and I'll cut you open again. Next time, I promise I'll use anesthesia. And by the way, come get your newborn daughter soon." If my teacher returns, he might just chop her up to accompany his drink. Instantly, the previously bustling darkness became eerily silent. Lin turned on his heel and went back to his potion shop. Without wasting any time, he rushed to the counter, rummaging through drawers beneath to find a small vial of a potent healing potion. He then quickly poured it over his right eye. The eye, which he had brutally gouged out, gradually regained its vitality. It still hurt, but the effect was undeniable. Rubbing his inflamed eye socket, Lin murmured, living in this world is indeed a constant state of anxiety. The reason he dared to gouge out his own eye wasn't out of sheer ruthlessness. He was aware that his shop housed advanced potions capable of rapidly healing injuries. However, these were luxury items, beyond his crafting skills. They were part of his teacher's private collection, meant for personal use and not for sale. Lin paused momentarily before accessing the system panel. Lin, what does this last comment mean? Isn't this insulting? It's not objective or fair at all. Except for not using anesthesia, he was very responsible for his patients. This is simply the system's malicious mockery of him. Lin shook his head. However, he quickly noticed that he had leveled up. He had moved from level 2 to level 3 and gained 4 additional assignable points. Have to say, from this point of view, the panel provided by this system really feels like it's from a low-quality online game. But clearly, this isn't a game. This is a vicious and dark alternative world where death is real. Lin didn't hesitate. He assigned all 4 points to physique. No other reason. To become a qualified doctor, one must have a strong physical constitution, especially in this chaotic world. A frail body can always become the last straw, endangering one's life. After all, survival is the first element in this world. Confirm. Instantly, Lin immediately felt a warm flow moving within his body. He knew those 4 attribute points were beginning to take effect. Subtly, the fatigue from the recent surgery was quickly swept away by this warm flow, replaced by inexhaustible strength. He took off his coat. He looked at his abdomen. Within those short few minutes, his originally flat abdomen now showed the contours of several abdominal muscles. Lin felt the beauty of having a healthy body. From the counter behind him came the crying of the ghost baby. Lin immediately went to the counter, holding the bloody ghost baby, and took a look. And this look revealed a problem. Due to its underdevelopment, it's roughly the size of 4 adult fists. A long umbilical cord wrapped around its waist. Its body was covered with streaks of crimson blood vessels, and on its cheeks, other than a mouth that resembled a black hole, the rest of the face was like covered in a layer of flesh mud, smooth without any features. Lin, just now, this ghost baby was at level 1. And in such a short time, it has actually risen to level 2. Does that mean this ghost baby is rapidly forming? At this moment, a system prompt sounded in his mind. Lin calmly looked at the 4 mission branches the system provided. Of course, it's the 4th one. Lin sat on the counter, put the ghost baby on the table, and seriously said while doing his calculations, I am a doctor. If someone leaves their child here, and I butcher and destroy it, wouldn't that make me a monster? My moral standard doesn't allow me to do such a thing. As a person with such professional ethics, don't you plan to add something to me, system? Lin, knife in hand, continued to wait for new customers. 2 minutes later, he opened his eyes and glanced at the ghost baby. He discovered its appearance had already started distorting into a grim twist. 5 minutes later, when he looked again, the baby's face began to grow various large and small blood tumors, and raspy noises came out of its dark mouth. 10 minutes later, when Lin opened his eyes again, that face was already crawling with numerous large and small twisted tentacles and black, intestine-like distortions. Lin's eye corner was twitching crazily. It seems what the system said was indeed correct. If left unchecked, this ghost baby is really becoming more and more indescribable. This can't go on. If it continues like this, not to mention whether the pigfolk would recognize his daughter or not, he himself can't bear it anymore. Too ugly. It's really damn too ugly. It's that kind of horrifyingly ugly. Lin stood up, stretched his wrists, and said, fine, consider yourself lucky. Let me give you free plastic surgery, so you stop scaring me now and scaring others in the future. He put on a mask and gloves. He took a rope and tied the ghost baby to the counter. The twisted tentacles on the ghost baby's face suddenly mutated into countless mouths, letting out terrifying roars at Lin. Slap! Lin slapped those tentacles back with one smack. Behave. He stretched out both hands, grabbed the wildly twisted tentacles on its face, and kneaded them forcefully as if kneading dough. Wah, wah, cries resembling fear emanated from the ghost baby's body. Plastic surgery is a technical job. Although Lin had never performed plastic surgery on anyone before, his skills in molding clay were quite proficient. In some sense, these two seem not much different. Then the first step of plastic surgery, naturally, is to mix all the messy viscous substances on the face evenly and make it sufficiently smooth. Only in this way can it lay a perfect foundation for subsequent face molding. The kneading dough also requires enough skills. It can't be too dry or too wet. You have to ensure it has enough elasticity and toughness. This is also a process that greatly tests hand strength. Don't move. Since I delivered you, as a doctor, I have an obligation to ensure your well-being during this time. Don't worry, your facial issues are in my hands. Lin, with a serious face, utilized the noodle-making skills he had before traversing to another world. And after kneading the substance on the ghost baby's face well, he pulled it outwards, twisted it and pressed it back in, then pulled again, twisted it twice and pressed it back inside. He thoroughly mixed all that viscous and nauseating substance until it became uniform and elastic, and the sounds coming from the ghost baby's body became more and more terrifying. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. A humanoid monster covered in burn scars, with a pus-filled face stood there. The crimson, foul-smelling slime kept flowing from his eye sockets, horrifying and eerie. I want a new face. A deep and hoarse voice came from the monster's throat. Lin took a glance. Welcome. Please have a seat over there and wait for a moment. Lin leaned out from in front of the ghost baby, a standard professional smile in his eyes. Splat. The thick fluid from the burst face of the ghost baby splashed onto Lin's mask. The burnt ghost who just walked in suddenly stiffened. Please sit, I'll be ready soon. Lin smiled. Then his attention returned to the ghost baby tied on the counter. To speed up the process, Lin had to use both hands. He grabbed both sides of the kneaded flesh ball and pulled it forcefully. Wow! A horrifying, fearful sound came from within the ghost baby. He twisted it into a braid, then pressed it back onto the face. Ah! The ghost baby trembled. Lin flattened the ghost baby and, using more force, started kneading the twisted flesh on its face. I'll be done soon. Please be patient. Lin, with a smile, lifted his head and showed a sincere expression to the burnt ghost sitting not far away on a chair. The burnt ghost stared blankly at the horror happening on the counter. Its legs subconsciously started to tremble. Swish, swish. The face of that ghost was rolled flat, and it screeched in terror. The pus-filled blisters all over the burnt ghost started to tremble. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. This potion shop he entered seems to be not right at all. It stretched out its burnt hand tremblingly, saying, "May I ask? Are you?" At his words, Lin, while kneading the flesh on the ghost baby's face, lifted his head, a sincere professional smile on his face, saying, "Oh, this little ghost is too ugly, even somewhat contaminatingly ugly. As a doctor, giving it a normal face is something I should do." The burnt ghost shivered all over. He said numbly, Your technique is indeed unique." He stiffened all over, the burnt eyes staring widely, and the hunched body straightened at some point. He watched the ghost baby's face in the hands of the doctor, being kneaded like noodles. His legs trembled even more. Horrifying images of his face being constantly pulled and stretched by this doctor immediately surfaced in his mind. The burnt ghost began to feel frightened. Originally, he saw the old freak from Bloodsaw Potion Shop leave today, so he wanted to try his luck, hoping to treat his burns with slightly less fear. But who knew that after the old freak left, a little freak remained. He, shivering, stared at the ghost baby lying on the counter, convulsing, its face almost a black mush. Could it be? Is this what awaits me next? He murmured. And at that moment, from behind the cloth curtain of the backyard came successive, piercing noises of a chainsaw being pulled. The burnt ghost, clutching his head, was so frightened that it felt like his bones would fall apart. A chainsaw. It's a chainsaw. Didn't he say he was going to the backyard to get some tools? Why would this be the sound of a chainsaw from the backyard? What are you doing with a chainsaw? In his mind, the image of a chainsaw murderer with a twisted smile on his face, walking step by step towards him, appeared. Black smoke released from his head, and then, in the next moment, his ears perked. Thud, thud. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. That person, carrying a chainsaw, was walking towards Highs. A shadow gradually appeared on the cloth curtain leading to the backyard, and the sound of the rotating chainsaw seemed almost at the forefront. The burnt ghost, terrified, clutched his head, values constantly floating above it. The next moment, the burnt ghost, with his sanity reduced to zero, scurried toward the exit in terror, tumbling and scrambling. A gangster store. Help, help, Lin. He lifted the curtain, astonished, gazing at the ashes left by the burnt ghost who crawled his way out, saying, "What happened? I just went to sharpen the surgical knife because it wasn't sharp enough. Why did he leave suddenly? And what's with his fear of me plus 400? Why is he extremely terrified of me? I have always adhered to the principle of service with a smile. I've been very polite, And I'm so serious about the guests, shouldn't this elicit a more favorable attitude toward me? Lin was puzzled. Well, he's gone now, Lin sighed regretfully. Anyway, let's deal with this ghost baby first. Ding. The small, sharp carving knife in Lin's hand gleamed dazzlingly. An hour later, Lin sat in front of the counter, his face full of satisfying smiles, lowering his knife and looking at the ghost baby sitting before his. Isn't it much more pleasing to the eye now? Cherry lips, chubby cheeks, big eyes, delicate nose. What was once a horrifying, indescribable mass of distortion had now, under Lin's meticulous carving, become cute and lifelike. Before traversing, Lin always ranked first in his handicraft class. Every clay portrait he sculpted received unanimous praise from his classmates. Lin smiled, feeling pleased. At this moment, a vertical pupil suddenly grew on the forehead of the ghost baby. Pop! Lin bursted instantly. He closed his eyes and said, "This is not the place for eyes to grow. This is a face I've painstakingly shaped. If you want to ruin it, don't blame me for cutting you again." Lin paused. So, this can also trigger a hidden task. It seems that many functions of this system still need to be explored. The next moment, 5 long strands of hair appeared in his hand. Descriptions of the 5 strands of hair immediately appeared before his eyes. Lin touched his chin. This seems to be a good defensive item, but these are only 5 strands, so I'll need to use them thoughtfully. Lin stored the hair strands away, sat in front of the counter, and quietly waited for the next customer to visit. Of course, his attention was always on the ghost doll in front of him. As soon as it showed any sign of degradation, Lin immediately pressed it back and adjusted it again. Time flew quickly. The light of the soul lamp outside the door gradually dimmed, and this also meant that the night of this world was about to fall. The method to distinguish between day and night in this dark world is to look at the light of the soul lamp, as it will not light up at night in this world. And this means, without the protection of the soul lamp, any monster can freely enter his shelter and tear him to pieces. Just as the light was dimming, and Lin was about to close up shop. Knock, knock, knock. Then came a knocking sound from outside the door. A tall man appeared there, wearing a thick, black cloak, a black top hat, and a head of long gray-white hair. The huge shadow projected from the door, giving a strong sense of oppression out of thin air. Lin's heart suddenly tightened, because the panel of that person appeared before his eyes. This seems to be a human. This was the first human he had encountered in this dark world in the past 2 years. Judging by the display, this was a being of explosive combat capability. I require healing, as well as some battle potions and recovery elixirs. From beneath the large top hat came the raspy voice of a middle-aged man. Lin instantly rose to his feet, a professional smile decorating his face, saying, "Welcome, please come in." The demon hunter strode through the main entrance, the soul lamp hanging by the door flickering frantically, nearly extinguishing. This also indicated the extraordinary strength of the demon hunter. The demon hunter sat at the counter, lifting his head to scrutinize Lin. Immediately, Lin felt his skin burn with pain. A mere glance inflicted harm, illustrating the strength of this man. I didn't expect to encounter another of my kind, alive, in this dark world. The demon hunter remarked with a fleeting glance. He detached a flask from his waist, took a sip, and a strong, pungent aroma of liquor hit the air. A thud resonated in Lin's heart. The moment he saw the task failure penalty pop up, he sensed misfortune. And indeed, it was just as he predicted. A demon hunter wandering the dark world would harbor no goodwill towards any monster, and fortunately, he was also human. Otherwise, this powerful man would have surely cleaved him in two. Lin steadied his emotions. He calmly looked at the demon hunter, smiling. "May I ask which of your wounds you would like me to heal?" Beneath the high hat, the pair of pallid lips moved slightly, and then he removed his cloak, turning around. In an instant, Lin's pupils contracted. His entire shoulder was a bleak shade of dark red. Upon it congealed lump after lump of dark blood, looking utterly ferocious. The injuries could only be described as horrifying. And Lin immediately wondered, what kind of being could have inflicted such wounds on this demon hunter? The demon hunter spoke in a raspy voice. "I was ambushed by a red-clothed evil spirit and nearly lost my life. I won't let her go, but first, I need to heal my wounds." Black butterfly. Lin hesitated. The demon hunter shifted slightly, sneering, "You actually know this poison. It seems I have underestimated you." Lin chuckled dryly. No, he didn't know. He merely subconsciously repeated the key term from the system prompt. "System, what is the black butterfly?" he asked inwardly. Lin shuddered. Without another word, he donned a full set of protective gear, including a mask and gloves. "Can I cure it?" he asked the system internally. Lin raised 2 boning knives, earnestly saying, "We need to conduct a surgical debridement first." The demon hunter hesitated for a moment, asking, "How proficient are you in surgery?" Lin nodded. "Rest assured, my experience is very extensive. Although this is only my 2nd time performing surgery, my previous patient gave me high praise. I have confidence." The demon hunter clearly paused for a while, seemingly weighing the pros and cons. Then Lin heard the hesitating voice from beneath the tall hat. "Are there any other medical shops nearby?" Lin sharpened his 2 boning knives, laughing heartily. "There should be none left, and even if there were, they probably would have been eradicated by my teacher. We don't allow the existence of a second medical shop around here, ha. A fleeting silence prevailed, the wind whistling as it danced with the cloak of the demon hunter. He then turned, baring his shoulder, and with closed eyes declared, "Fine. I'll trust you this once, proceed with the blade." "Alrighty." A satisfied grin bloomed on Lin's face. 2 large knives clanged and scraped against each other in his hands. Clang, clang, sparks flew. It was faintly visible that beneath the shadow of that tall hat, the craggy corner of the demon hunter's bearded mouth twitched slightly. For some unknown reason, he felt as if he had wandered into the wrong place. It didn't look like a medical shop at all, but rather more like a butcher's shop. Was it just his illusion? Why did this seemingly weak lad always give off an urge to turn around and run immediately? "Do you need anesthesia?" Lin excitedly asked, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "No need." The demon hunter took a sip of his drink, glanced at him, and calmly stated, "Anesthesia would only affect my neural reflex speed. A true man never uses anesthesia." With a snap, Lin gave a thumbs up, earnestly responding, "Great, I have never used anesthesia on anyone. It seems we are truly in sync." A jolt went through the demon hunter's heart. What had he just said? However, before he could react, the sound of the blade entering the flesh resounded, and his entire body instantly stiffened. He cranked his head around, gazing at the knife embedded in his shoulder, and mumbled in a daze, "Has it started?" Lin calmly replied, "No, just testing the knife." "Oh." The demon hunter turned his head again, in a daze, his hand reaching subconsciously for his wine flask, intending to take another sip. But for some unknown reason, the hand holding the flask trembled slightly. There shouldn't be any big problem. This kid might seem unreliable, but he surely wouldn't dare play any tricks and offend a distinguished demon hunter. Plunge. The demon hunter. "What the hell are you doing now?" The demon hunter turned his head, his eyes glaring, beholding another knife embedded in his shoulder. Lin seriously held his toolbox, stating, selecting tools of appropriate size, "I'll leave those 2 in his spares." The demon hunter, his eyes nearly bursting, retorted, "Can't your spares be placed beside? Must you stick them in my shoulder?" Lin shook his head, calmly explaining, "Sir, I am testing the sharpness of the surgical knives. You should be aware if a knife is not sharp, the pain induced while cutting would be more severe, which is extremely undesirable. So, as a doctor, I must ensure my knives perfectly suit your flesh, and the places where the knives are inserted will be cut off anyway. You don't need to be overly concerned about the condition of your shoulder." The demon hunter was petrified in place. Damn, that made sense. But did he really do this unintentionally? Why did it sound so unreasonable no matter how he heard it? "Stop measuring." His teeth ground together, one hand tightly clutching the wine jug, he commanded, "Use these 2 knives and tend to my wounds immediately. If you dawdle, I'll end you on the spot." He revealed the shining revolver tied around his waist. "But, no buts. Proceed to the next step immediately." He slapped the table, his expression fierce. "Very well." Lin emerged, carrying a furnace. Hiss. He stirred the coals inside with a knife, then plunged various tools from the counter into it. "What are you doing?" The demon hunter's eyes twitched involuntarily. Lin calmly picked up a red-hot knife, sterilizing. The black butterfly is an extremely aggressive, corrosive poison. To prevent the venom from accidentally seeping into your other tissues during the cleaning process, the best method is to use high temperatures to kill it. It might hurt a bit, but it's exceptionally effective. Cling. Lin tapped the red-hot surgical knife, sparks flying. "Have you ever done this before?" He hesitated. Lin seriously replied, "I haven't personally, but I spent 2 years with my master, and I've seen him do it." The demon hunter sighed in relief. Lin, especially when slaughtering pigs and plucking hairs, with a sweep of the red-hot knife, they all come off neatly. A few minutes later, Lin pulled the 2 red-hot knives from the furnace and calmly walked behind the demon hunter, firmly stating, "I'm going to start. It might hurt a bit, so bear with it." The demon hunter clenched his fists tightly, eyes closed, grinding his teeth. "I can certainly bear it. But I just want to ask, what the hell are all these plates on the counter for?" "Cooking," he roared, pointing to the plates on the counter before him. Lin seriously replied, "You're overthinking it, sir. These plates are to hold the necrotic flesh that will be cut away shortly because we must administer the appropriate regenerative potion based on the amount of flesh removed. Otherwise, if the dosage is not calculated correctly, it could lead to unnecessary tissue growth on your shoulder. This is for your own good. The demon hunter gritted his teeth. Start cutting. If it wasn't for the fact that this was the only potion shop within hundreds of kilometers, he swore he would never set foot in this damned place, because it always felt like a trap. Alright, I'm going to begin. Lin's expression was serious. In an instant, thud, thud, the sound of knives entering flesh resounded, followed by the continuous sounds of cutting and sizzling. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.